You weren't healing there. You were disappearing slowly. And when your soul could no longer scream, Allah moved you himself. 1. You thought you were strong enough to stay, but Allah loved you too much to let you. You kept telling yourself to be patient, that things would get better, that the coldness in their voice wasn't intentional, that maybe if you stayed kind, stayed soft, stayed available, they'd return to who they used to be. So you kept giving, kept showing up, kept forgiving things that quietly broke you, just because you remembered who they were, not who they were becoming. And deep down, you felt it shifting. At first, it was so small, you didn't want to say it out loud. You felt like maybe you were being too sensitive. Maybe it was just your emotions. Maybe you're just asking for too much. But it wasn't your sensitivity. It was your soul whispering to you that something sacred was disappearing. You noticed the eye contact didn't hold you anymore. The warmth in their "I'm here for you" turned into a cold "What do you want now?" Your presence stopped being something they celebrated and slowly became something they tolerated. You started hesitating before speaking. You edited your feelings. You held your breath in moments where love was supposed to feel safe. And the scariest part? You still didn't leave. You told yourself this was just how love worked, that maybe every connection fades a little, that maybe your expectations were too high. So you lowered them, and then lowered them again, until you could barely recognize the version of you that used to smile fully. But the one who created you, he was watching. Allah was watching the way your heart kept bleeding while you convinced yourself it was just part of the process. He saw you replaying old memories just to survive the present. He saw you practicing conversations in your head that you were too afraid to have. He saw you crying in sujood, asking him to fix something that was already spiritually finished. And because you wouldn't leave, because your loyalty was louder than your pain, he had to begin breaking the illusion you were stuck inside. So he removed the softness from their voice. He let their replies get shorter. He let your love feel invisible, not to punish you, but to rescue you, because you weren't walking away. You were staying while dying inside. So Allah began peeling the layers back. He let their words sting sharper. He let the silence last longer. He let the smile you used to live for feel distant and distracted. It wasn't to break your heart. It was to wake it up. Because the person you were holding on to, you were holding on to who they used to be, not who they really were now. And Allah, out of His mercy, wouldn't let you keep pretending. He knew you wouldn't stop trying. You would have spent years praying for someone who wasn't even praying for you. You would have kept giving your light to someone who only stood near you when they needed warmth. So He stepped in. He didn't scream. He didn't snatch them away. He just allowed you to finally feel what was always true. You weren't safe there anymore, and no amount of pretending could make it feel like love again. You didn't see it as a rescue. You saw it as rejection. You called it heartbreak. But it was actually the moment your soul was pulled out from under the rubble of false hope. You were exhausted, tired of trying to be enough in a place where your enoughness didn't even matter anymore. And Allah knew, if He didn't shift the energy, if He didn't allow the change to cut deep, you would never leave. You'd just keep bleeding, silently, calling it love. So He moved them, changed them, exposed them, drained what you thought was peace, so that your soul would have no choice but to crawl back toward Him. He broke your idea of love, so He could rebuild your understanding of safety. You thought you were strong for staying, but Allah showed you that His love for you was stronger, stronger than your attachment, stronger than your illusions, stronger than your stubborn heart, because you would have kept begging for closeness, even as you were spiritually suffocating. So he pulled you out. Gently, silently, but completely. You didn't walk away. You were carried by a Lord who refused to let you stay where love had died. Just because you didn't know how to say goodbye, He said it for you. 2. Allah let the person you loved become unrecognizable, so you'd stop worshipping their potential. You kept holding on to the idea of them, not the reality, not the version that stood in front of you, but the version you saw in your heart, the one you imagined, the one you believed they could be. If only they healed, if only they changed, if only they saw what you saw in them. You fell in love with their potential, and that's why it hurt so much. Because every time they disappointed you, you didn't grieve who they were. You grieved the future you built around who you hoped they'd become. And that hope, it made you blind. Blind to how their words slowly lost their meaning. Blind to how their effort faded while your effort tripled. Blind to the way their character shifted, while you kept clinging to old memories like proof that they're still in there somewhere. But the truth is, they weren't. Allah knew you would have stayed forever, trying to heal someone who didn't even want to meet themselves. So He began stripping away the illusion, piece by piece, slowly, almost painfully. The laugh you loved became hollow. The way they spoke to you changed. What used to feel like light began to feel like pressure. What once made you feel safe now made you feel small. You kept waiting for them to come back. But Allah wasn't going to let you keep loving an illusion. So He let them become unrecognizable. Not because they changed overnight, but because Allah finally removed the veil from your heart. He allowed you to see them fully. Not just who they were in your imagination, but who they actually were when no one was watching. And it hurt. It hurt because deep down, you still believed in who they could have been. And letting go of that dream felt like losing a piece of yourself. But Allah needed to show you. You were worshipping what was possible more than you were seeing what was present. You were begging for signs to keep going, but ignoring the signs He already gave to stop. So He turned their presence bitter. He let you taste the coldness in their behavior. He let their silence scream louder than their promises. Because your heart needed the shock. Your heart needed to wake up. You weren't loving them anymore. You were loving a fantasy. And that fantasy was blinding you from your worth, your future, and your closeness to Allah. You would have stayed hoping for them to transform, but Allah saw that every second you waited, you were losing parts of yourself. So He made it clear. He let them become someone you could no longer recognize, not to break you, but to release you, because the version you kept hoping for, it only lived in your prayers, not in reality. And sometimes, the most painful mercy is when Allah won't allow a lie to feel like love anymore. So now, when you look at them, there's no more illusion. There's no more pretending. You see the truth, and that truth hurts, but it sets your soul free, because now you're not in love with who they could be. You're starting to love the one person who deserves your loyalty the most, you. And that was the moment Allah pulled you out of worshipping their potential and brought you back to the reality of who you are and who He wants you to become. 3. Allah let you lose what looked like peace because it was quietly poisoning you. You thought you finally found peace. Not perfect peace, but just enough to breathe. You told yourself, it's calm now. It's not like before. There was less shouting, fewer storms. Things looked stable. And so, you stayed. You stayed because you were tired of the chaos. Because the silence, even if it felt a little cold, still felt safer than starting over. But what you didn't realize was that what looked like peace on the outside was slowly poisoning you on the inside. Because peace is not the absence of noise. It's the presence of safety, of softness, of sincerity. And deep down, you knew you weren't safe anymore. You weren't soft anymore. You weren't even you anymore. You were shrinking, censoring your truth, smiling in rooms that didn't deserve your light. You stopped talking about your dreams. You stopped asking for anything. You stopped being felt even when you were right there. You called it peace, but it was just quiet control. You convinced yourself it was stability, but it was just emotional silence dressed as love. And you kept drinking it like it was water, not realizing it was slowly draining your soul. Because even poison tastes sweet when you've been starved long enough. And Allah saw it. He saw how numb you became, how good you got at calling it peace, just because it wasn't as painful as the past. He saw how you silenced your intuition, how you clung to stillness, even when that stillness was suffocating. So he stepped in. He began to disturb what you were calling calm, not by sending storms, but by letting your soul become restless. You started feeling off, even when everything looked fine. You started waking up tired, even after a full night's sleep. You began feeling unseen in rooms you used to feel loved in. You stopped laughing with your eyes. You stopped feeling like your presence mattered. That wasn't you losing your mind. That was Allah protecting your soul. Because He won't let His beloved servants stay in a place that's slowly killing them, just because they've learned how to breathe in the poison. So He removed it. He let what you thought was finally working fall apart. He let the connection go dry. He let the moment stop feeling sacred. He let the space you prayed to stay in lose its sweetness. Because He needed you to remember, peace that silences your soul isn't peace at all. It's quiet destruction. And even though you begged Him to preserve it, Allah loved you enough to remove it. Because He knew, if He didn't, you would have stayed and died with a smile on your face. Not because you were healed, but because you were numb. So when everything you clung to suddenly became empty, when the comfort you thought was a gift started to feel heavy, don't call it failure, call it mercy. Because that version of peace wasn't peace. It was your slow erasure. And Allah refused to let you disappear in a life that was never meant to keep you whole. He let it fade. He let it rot. He let it collapse. So He could rebuild something that felt like real peace. Not just silence, but safety. Not just quiet, but closeness. Not just surviving, but living again. 4. Allah made your spirit flinch in the places your body still sat. You kept showing up, to the same room, to the same people, to the same places. But something felt different. You couldn't explain it. You just didn't feel like yourself anymore. Your smile didn't sit right on your face. Your voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere far away. Your laughter. It wasn't rising from joy anymore. It was rising from habit. You told yourself you were tired, burnt out, in need of rest. But even when you rested, the ache didn't leave. Because what you were feeling wasn't just physical. It was your spirit flinching. Allah was trying to get your attention. Not through thunder, not through pain, but through a sacred discomfort. A type of quiet resistance in your soul that rose every time you entered the same space you used to feel safe in. The same arms, the same conversation, the same normal. And suddenly, it didn't feel right. You'd sit in the same room, but your heart would beat a little faster. You'd hear the same voice, but your soul would tense. You'd pray in the same corner, but your heart felt further from Allah than ever before. It wasn't random. It was a divine signal. You no longer belonged there. Not because you were better, not because you were ungrateful, but because your soul was evolving, and the space you were sitting in wasn't evolving with you. You kept trying to shrink yourself back into a shape that no longer fit. You tried to mute your heart's longing just to preserve something that was already dying. But your soul couldn't lie anymore. Allah made your spirit flinch, so your body would stop pretending. So your loyalty wouldn't bury you alive. So your comfort zone wouldn't become your grave. You started feeling guilty for wanting distance, for craving silence, for not feeling safe around the people you once called home. But what you were feeling was not wrong. It was revelation, a sacred disruption, a divine warning. Your soul is outgrowing the atmosphere it once survived in. You were too aware to stay numb, too awake to keep sleeping through red flags, too close to Allah to be satisfied with artificial peace. So your body still sat, still smiled, still nodded, but your soul, it started shaking its head in silence. It whispered, "This isn't your place anymore." And even though you couldn't explain why, even though everything looked fine on the outside, Allah had already pulled your soul halfway out. That's why nothing felt real anymore, because He was preparing to move you. Not just physically, but spiritually. He was pulling your light out of dark rooms. He was separating your future from a past you kept returning to out of habit. He was calling you back to Him. And sometimes, the first step in that return is a flinch, a sudden tightness in the chest when you enter the wrong place, a moment of loneliness even when you're surrounded, an invisible tear before the smile. Those moments aren't weakness. They're whispers. They're signs. Your body still sat in the same chair, but your soul was already searching for the exit, already begging for light, already walking away in silence. And Allah, He heard it. So He made your spirit flinch, not to break you, but to awaken you, because what you feel isn't confusion. It's direction. It's your soul asking for a new home, and your Lord preparing to bring you there. 5. Allah didn't wait for you to ask for help. He answered what your soul couldn't say out loud. You didn't say it. Not out loud. Not in words. You couldn't, because how do you explain a heaviness that has no name? How do you describe pain that's so quiet? Even you started to believe it wasn't real. So you stayed silent. You smiled. You told people you were fine. You told yourself you were fine. But in the quiet, in the space between conversations, between tasks, between prayers, your soul whispered something different. I can't keep doing this. But even that wasn't said in words. It was said in exhaustion, in a gaze that stared too long at the ceiling, in a prayer that felt empty even though your heart was screaming inside it, in the way your chest tightened during small conversations, because you didn't feel safe enough to be fully seen by anyone. So you didn't ask for help. Not because you didn't believe in Allah, but because you didn't know what to ask for anymore. Because you weren't sure what was wrong. You just knew something wasn't right. But He knew. He heard what didn't leave your lips. He felt what your body had gotten too used to carrying. He saw what you were trying to survive, what you were normalizing, just so you wouldn't collapse under the weight of it. He saw you crying, not in tears, but in silence, in how you stopped laughing with your eyes, in how you started pulling away before anyone could get too close, in how your body showed up, but your soul never fully arrived. And Allah, He didn't wait for a formal dua. He didn't wait for perfect words. He didn't wait for the night you finally broke down and begged. He stepped in. He began answering the plea that never left your tongue, but was written all over your spirit. He started shifting things you didn't have the strength to let go of. He closed doors you were too emotionally attached to. He ended conversations that were slowly erasing your worth. He removed people you kept asking him to fix, because he knew healing wouldn't come through them. He interrupted what was draining you, even while you were still calling it love, or purpose, or maybe it'll change. He heard the moment your soul said, "I can't do this anymore," even when your mouth said, "I'm okay." Because Allah doesn't need words to rescue you. He doesn't need tears to see your pain. He doesn't need explanations to understand your ache. He just needs truth. And when your truth became too heavy to carry, He carried it for you. When you were too tired to get up for tahajjud, but your heart still longed for Him. He counted that longing as a conversation. When you couldn't cry anymore, but the quiet in your room felt like a wound, He called that silence a prayer. You didn't need to ask. You were the dua, because Allah listens to the soul, even when the voice is gone. And when everyone around you believed your "I'm fine," Allah looked deeper. He saw the version of you that no one clapped for, no one checked on, no one heard. And that's the one He responded to. So, if you're wondering why things changed, why people drifted, why places you loved suddenly closed their doors, it's because Allah was answering a request you didn't know how to make. He was healing wounds you forgot you had. He was protecting the future you didn't believe you deserved anymore. He was responding to a broken heart that never stopped whispering for help, even when your mouth stayed shut. Because Allah doesn't need the volume of your voice. He only needs the honesty of your soul. And when your soul trembled in silence, He moved the entire universe to bring you back to Him. 6. Allah let you be rejected, so you'd finally return to what was real. You tried so hard to belong, to be chosen, to be seen fully and loved anyway. You kept showing up with your best, your softness, your sincerity, your loyalty. And every time you thought, maybe now they'll understand me, something shifted. The warmth vanished. The energy grew cold. You were left on red. You were left behind. And even then, you blamed yourself. You wondered if you were too much, too emotional, too intense, too real. You started editing who you were, shrinking yourself just to fit into places that kept pushing you out. But no matter how small you became, how quiet you spoke, how careful you were, they still rejected you. They still chose not to see you. Not really. They saw the surface. They saw the parts that benefited them. But the rest of you, the deep, complex, beautiful parts of your soul, they left those untouched. And it broke you in ways you didn't even talk about. Because how do you explain the pain of not being chosen by someone you would have bent the world for? But here's the truth. You weren't rejected. You were redirected. Because Allah knew you were about to spend your entire future proving your worth to someone who could barely carry your present. You would have built your world around someone who kept you on the edge of their plans. You would have given your lifetime to a chapter they were never serious about reading. And He couldn't let that happen. So He allowed them to walk away, or grow distant, or lie to your face, or leave you confused, questioning your value. He let them choose someone else, or nothing at all, so that you'd stop choosing people who never had the eyes to see your soul. You think the rejection broke you, but it actually freed you. Because if they had stayed, you would have kept molding yourself into what they liked. You would have kept betraying your own softness just to survive in their world. So, Allah broke the illusion. He let the conversation end. He let the energy die. He let them forget you so that you would remember him, because the moment they stopped seeing you was the moment Allah started showing you who you really are. Rejection hurts, but sometimes it's the only thing that can silence the noise of your nafs. Sometimes it's the only way to get you to pause and ask, Ya Allah, was I even meant to be there? And his answer comes in the form of silence, of doors that don't open, of names that stop calling, of places that no longer feel like home, because he's calling you back, not just to him, but to yourself, to who you were before you bent yourself trying to be loved, to the fitra he gave you, the one that didn't need filters or games or performance. You were always enough, but he had to let the wrong ones reject you, so you'd finally stop begging for a seat at a table that couldn't feed your soul. So next time you're left unread, remember, Allah read everything, every tear, every sacrifice, every dua you made while they slept peacefully, not even thinking about you. You were never forgotten. You were protected. And when you return to what's real, to the prayer mat, to the rawness, to the one place where you never have to shrink to be accepted, you'll realize something powerful. They didn't reject you. Allah removed you, so you could finally come back home. 7. Allah crushed the cycle you kept calling healing because it was only delaying your resurrection. You kept telling yourself you were healing because you stopped crying as much, because you got better at hiding the pain, because you could get through the day without breaking down, because you were functioning, and everyone around you believed it. They clapped for your strength. They admired your resilience. They called you brave, but they didn't see that inside you were still bleeding. You'd just learned how to do it quietly. You told yourself you were healing because you were journaling, listening to reminders, reading books about moving on. But the truth is, you weren't healing. You were looping in a cycle that looked like recovery, but was really just survival. Because healing isn't just about being busy or distracted or saying I'm fine with a slightly stronger voice. Healing is confrontation. It's stillness. It's sitting with the wound long enough to feel it, not just mask it. And you weren't ready for that yet, because the wound was still too raw. So you kept circling it, dancing around the pain, performing peace. You convinced yourself you were moving forward, but really, you were just walking in circles, around the same heartbreak, around the same betrayal, around the same question, why wasn't I enough? And Allah saw it. He saw how tired you were of pretending you were okay. He saw how long you tried to fake progress, just to avoid the silence where the truth lived. He saw you building a routine around your pain, not to heal it, but to hide it. So he shattered the cycle. He made the distractions stop working. He made the people you vented to feel distant. He made the motivational quotes lose their effect. He let the numbness wear off, so that your soul would finally feel again, not to break you, but to resurrect you, because he knew this version of you, the one looping endlessly in the name of healing, was not the version he wrote your future for. He had to pull you out, and sometimes pulling you out means pulling everything down. So he crushed the systems you built to avoid the wound. He made the mask heavy. He made the smile crack. He made the I'm fine start to tremble. Because you weren't made to cope. You were made to rise. But your resurrection couldn't happen in that cycle. Not in that pattern of overthinking, of checking their profile, of waiting for closure, of reliving what they said, of hoping the past could somehow give you peace. It couldn't. And Allah wouldn't let you keep circling a grave He wanted you to walk away from. So He broke it. The routine, the illusion, the false sense of progress that was really just spiritual delay. You didn't understand it at first. You felt like you were falling backward, but you weren't. You were falling through the pain, through the silence, through the denial, and into the truth. The truth that healing without surrender is just performance. That coping isn't the same as cleansing. That recovery without remembrance of Allah is just escape in disguise. So He stopped letting you escape. He cornered your soul gently and asked, "Are you ready to actually rise now?" And that's when the cycle ended. Not because you were strong, but because He was. Because you would have stayed in that endless loop of surviving just enough to get by, but never fully coming back to life. So He ended what you couldn't, because He wrote something greater for you than just surviving in pain that looked like progress. He wrote a resurrection. And before you could rise, He had to make sure nothing fake remained. 8. You didn't escape. Allah spiritually dragged you out before you lost yourself forever. You didn't walk away like a warrior. You didn't rise up with clarity. You didn't slam the door behind you with power in your steps. You didn't even fully decide. You lingered for too long in a space that had already stopped serving your soul. You kept going back, kept opening the same door, kept rereading the same message, kept convincing yourself that maybe, just maybe, if you stayed a little longer, it would all make sense. But deep down, you knew something was wrong, something heavy, something dangerous. Your soul had started to disappear in small pieces. Your reflection no longer looked familiar. Your voice, the one that used to sound so certain, started to tremble, even in your own head. But still, you stayed. You told yourself it was love, or loyalty, or destiny. You prayed harder, cried longer, begged Allah to change it, instead of asking if you were meant to be in it at all. And while you kept begging Him to fix it, He was preparing to free you, because you didn't have the strength to break it. So He broke it for you, not to punish you, but to save you. You didn't leave that person. You didn't walk out of that place. You didn't move on from that chapter. You were pulled, spiritually, suddenly, invisibly, painfully. Doors closed without explanation. People vanished without proper goodbyes. The energy shifted so sharply, you thought something was wrong with you. But nothing was wrong. It was divine intervention, because you would have stayed until you couldn't recognize yourself anymore. You would have kept serving in a space that was slowly starving you. You would have given every last part of your light to someone who was never going to protect it. And Allah, the one who created your soul, the one who shaped your softness with His own mercy, refused to let you keep fading in silence. So He dragged you out, not with your hands, but with your heart. He made the connection so uncomfortable that staying became heavier than leaving. He made the words you used to live for start feeling fake. He made the room you once prayed to be in start pressing against your chest like a cage. Because when Allah decides to remove you, no power on earth can keep you where your soul no longer belongs. Even you, with all your reasons, with all your feelings, with all your loyalty. Even you couldn't stop the extraction. You didn't escape. You were spiritually evacuated, because He saw what was happening inside of you. He saw your softness becoming resentment, your joy becoming numbness, your worship becoming distant. He saw the way you started to forget how to feel close to Him, because you were so busy chasing closeness with someone else. and he couldn't allow it. So he moved everything. He broke the comfort. He shattered the illusion. He rearranged the circumstances in such a way that the only way to breathe again was to leave. But it wasn't you who left. It was him pulling your soul by the hand and whispering, "You've done enough. Come back to me now." And that's why it all collapsed. Because he wouldn't let you bury yourself in something he never wrote for your resurrection. So the next time you think you were weak for not walking away sooner, remember, you didn't leave late. You were saved right on time. You didn't fail to escape. You were divinely extracted. You didn't get over it quickly. You were being rewired for something your pain could never prepare you for. Because what was killing you in silence would have taken the real you with it. If Allah hadn't come and pulled you out himself. And when you look back now, when you see how far you've come, when you finally breathe without guilt, know this: you stayed too long. You forgave too much. You loved too deeply. But Allah saw what you couldn't. And when you couldn't leave, He came and got you Himself. So if your heart still wonders why it ended, if your mind keeps asking what you could have done differently, just know this: it didn't end because you were too much. It ended because your soul was dying quietly in a place you kept calling home. And Allah, the one who heard the du'as you never said, the one who saw the nights you couldn't cry anymore, the one who watched you give love like water while your own cup ran dry, He stepped in. He didn't wait for your strength. He didn't wait for your courage. He saw you breaking in silence and came and got you Himself. You didn't walk away. You were carried, rescued, protected. And when you look back at everything that shattered, everything that changed without warning, everything that left, you'll finally realize you stayed too long. You forgave too much. You loved too deeply. But Allah saw what you couldn't. And when you couldn't leave, He came and got you Himself.